The Charleston Heritage Gala was the pinnacle of the city's social calendar, a glittering affair where Charleston's elite mingled beneath the soft, warm glow of antique chandeliers. This year's gala was set in an opulent antebellum mansion, its iconic white columns wrapped in vines of blooming jasmine. Hundreds of lanterns dotted the sprawling gardens, their soft flicker creating an almost magical glow against the night's balmy air. The distant hum of a string quartet provided the perfect backdrop to the murmurs of laughter and conversation drifting through the crowd. Evelyn Harper stepped out of her sleek black car onto the gravel driveway. Her emerald gown shimmered under the soft light, the fabric catching the hues of a dew-kissed garden at sunrise. The dress, a bespoke creation that fit her with elegant precision, wasn't chosen for vanity. It was a declaration. She wasn't attending this gala as anyone's ex-wife or a relic of Charleston's old money. Tonight she was here to reclaim her place, not with nostalgia, but with power. As she ascended the stone steps to the mansion, a noticeable shift rippled through the crowd. Conversations paused, and heads turned. Evelyn felt their gazes, the weight of judgment and curiosity palpable, but she held her head high. Her heels clicked against the polished wooden floors as she entered the grand foyer, her composure unwavering. The room was a masterpiece of Southern charm, filled with glittering chandeliers, the soft hum of violins, and Charleston's finest dressed in tailored suits and shimmering pearls. Evelyn didn't falter. She greeted familiar faces with polite nods but didn't linger. Tonight wasn't about dwelling on the past. It was about forging a new beginning. As she crossed the room, her presence commanded attention, not just from the whispers of old friends, but from someone unexpected. "Evelyn, my dear!" Margaret Lancaster's melodic voice carried across the room, drawing Evelyn's attention. Margaret, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and champagne flute in hand, was the epitome of Charleston's old money charm. More importantly, she had been Evelyn's most ardent supporter since her high-profile divorce. "Margaret," Evelyn greeted with a smile, embracing her mentor lightly. "You look stunning as always." Margaret leaned back to examine Evelyn with a critical eye before smiling approvingly. "And you've outdone yourself, my dear. That gown. I dare say, Jonathan won't know what hit him." The mention of her ex-husband sent a faint tremor through Evelyn, though she didn't let it show. She tightened her grip on her clutch, her tone calm but firm. "I didn't come for him." Margaret arched a brow, a sly smile tugging at her lips. "No, of course not. This is about the museum project." Evelyn nodded, her resolve hardening. The restoration of the Charleston Museum was her passion project, a chance to leave a legacy of her own. But Margaret's next words hinted at the challenge ahead. "Henry Barrington is here tonight," Margaret said, motioning subtly toward the far end of the room. "He's the key to funding. If you want the board to take your proposal seriously, you'll need his support." Evelyn's gaze followed Margaret's. Henry Barrington, tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, exuded effortless confidence. His reputation as a savvy investor and philanthropist preceded him, and he was precisely the kind of ally Evelyn needed. Taking a steadying breath, she prepared to make her move, but her composure was tested when a familiar voice spoke her name. "Evelyn." She turned to see Jonathan Pierce, her ex-husband, standing just a few feet away. His gaze was steady, his smile thin. By his side was Anna Caldwell, the younger woman whose affair with Jonathan had fractured Evelyn's life 6 months prior. The sight of them together was a sharp reminder of the pain she'd worked so hard to bury. Evelyn's heart clenched, but she refused to let the cracks show. Instead, she offered a cool, practiced smile. "Jonathan." Anna's nervous laughter filled the silence. She clung to Jonathan's arm, her scarlet gown a glaring contrast to the understated elegance around her. Evelyn noted the younger woman's fidgeting grip an overly bright smile. It reeked of insecurity. "Evelyn, you look well," Jonathan said, his tone teetering between surprise and condescension. Evelyn met his gaze evenly. "And you're as polished as ever." The tension between them was palpable, drawing the attention of nearby guests who pretended not to eavesdrop. Evelyn let the silence hang for a moment before nodding toward Anna. "Anna." Anna blinked, as if surprised to be addressed directly. "It's so nice to see you, Evelyn," she said, her voice overly sweet. "Jonathan's told me so much about your projects." Evelyn tilted her head slightly, her smile sharp. "Has he? I wasn't aware he kept up with my work." "How kind of him." Jonathan's jaw tightened, a flicker of discomfort flashing in his eyes. Satisfied, Evelyn turned her attention back to Margaret, who was observing the exchange with thinly veiled amusement. "Henry's still waiting," Margaret murmured. "Go on, my dear. Let them see what real grace looks like." Evelyn straightened her shoulders, her resolve hardening once more. With deliberate poise, she crossed the room, her emerald gown flowing like liquid against the parquet floor. She exchanged brief pleasantries with a few guests but never lingered, her focus fixed on Henry Barrington. "Mr. Barrington," she greeted as she approached, extending a hand. "Evelyn Harper." Henry turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, followed by a warm smile. "The Evelyn Harper. I've heard about your work on the Sandridge estate. Quite remarkable." She allowed a modest smile. "That's kind of you to say. I hope to bring that same vision to the Charleston Museum restoration." "Ambitious," Henry replied, raising his glass slightly. "I like that. But restoring a museum isn't without its challenges. Bureaucracy, funding, it's not for the faint of heart." Evelyn leaned in slightly, her voice low and steady. "I've faced far greater challenges than city council paperwork, Mr. Barrington. Rest assured I'm ready." Henry laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Touché. Let's discuss this further. I'd like to hear more about your vision." As they spoke, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose. But out of the corner of her eye, she caught Jonathan watching her, his expression carefully neutral but his posture tense. She didn't need to guess what he was thinking. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let him take it away. Tonight wasn't about Jonathan or the past. It was about Evelyn Harper, a woman stepping into her power and rewriting her future. The rain drummed softly against the wide bay windows of Evelyn Harper's townhouse, the rhythmic sound blending with the crackling fire in the hearth. The night's events at the gala replayed vividly in her mind, each exchange pulling at emotions she had worked so hard to tame. She sat in the plush armchair by the fireplace, cradling a steaming mug of chamomile tea, the warmth in her hands grounding her as the storm outside mirrored the turbulence in her thoughts. Jonathan's sudden reappearance at the gala had been a calculated move. Evelyn knew him too well to believe it was a coincidence. The presence of Anna Caldwell, her arm wrapped possessively around him, had reopened old wounds she thought had healed. Yet, as much as it stung, Evelyn felt a simmering satisfaction at the way she had held her ground. The whispers that had followed their encounter were proof enough. Jonathan had underestimated her resolve. But it was Henry Barrington's interest in her museum restoration project that lingered in her mind, offering a glimmer of hope amid the storm. His promise to arrange a formal meeting to discuss funding was more than she could have hoped for. If she could secure his support, the board's approval would almost certainly follow. Still, Evelyn couldn't shake the thought, was his interest purely professional, or did it extend beyond her proposal? His steady gaze and warm smile had suggested a curiosity she wasn't ready to explore. "Mom?" Evelyn looked up to see her daughter, Grace, standing in the doorway. 16 years old and at that delicate intersection between girlhood and womanhood, Grace carried her father's sharp features but her mother's quiet strength. She wore an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. "Couldn't sleep?" Evelyn asked, motioning for Grace to join her. Grace nodded and sank into the sofa beside her, curling her legs beneath her. For a moment she stared into the fire, her expression contemplative. "I saw the photos online," she said softly. "You looked amazing tonight." Evelyn chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from Grace's face. "Thank you, sweetheart. It was an eventful evening. Dad was there, wasn't he?" "With her." Evelyn stiffened slightly but kept her voice even. "He was." Grace hesitated, biting her lip. "Do you think he's happy?" The question hung in the air, unexpected, and waited. Evelyn turned to her daughter, searching for the right words. "Happiness is complicated, Grace," she said finally. "Sometimes people chase things they think will make them happy, only to realize they've lost something far more important along the way." "Like us?" Grace's voice was barely above a whisper, her eyes glistening as she looked up at her mother. Evelyn's heart ached at the vulnerability in her daughter's gaze. She reached out, pulling Grace into a gentle embrace. "Your father made his choices, and so did I," she said. "But I wouldn't trade what we have now for anything. We're stronger because of it." Grace rested her head on Evelyn's shoulder, and for a moment the storm outside felt far away. Evelyn stroked her daughter's hair, the firelight dancing across their faces. She had rebuilt so much in the past 6 months, but moments like these reminded her of the most important things she had fought to protect, her family. The next morning arrived with the crisp clarity that often follows a storm. Sunlight pierced through the rain-streaked windows, flooding the townhouse with light. Evelyn stood in the kitchen, pouring herself a second cup of coffee while reviewing her notes for the day. The meeting with Henry Barrington loomed large on her agenda. She needed to refine her pitch, ensuring it not only highlighted the museum's historical significance but also emphasized its community impact. The sharp ring of her phone broke the morning stillness. Evelyn glanced at the screen and answered. "Good morning, Margaret." "Darling, I assume you've already heard the post-gala gossip," Margaret said, her voice tinged with amusement. Evelyn chuckled. "I can only imagine. It's all anyone can talk about," Margaret continued. "Your appearance was nothing short of triumphant. And that exchange with Jonathan, well, a few of the old guard are still buzzing about it." "I wasn't looking to create a spectacle," Evelyn said, though a small part of her relished the thought. "Of course not," Margaret replied with mock innocence. "But these things have a way of working in your favor. Now, are you ready for today's meeting with Henry?" Evelyn exhaled, glancing at her notes. "I believe so. But I suspect he'll have questions about the financial structure. I need to make sure I have compelling answers." "Henry admires vision," Margaret said. "You'll do just fine. Besides, you've already made an impression. The museum board is keen to see your concept come to life." Margaret's reassurance bolstered Evelyn's confidence, and after hanging up, she spent the next hour fine-tuning her presentation. The museum restoration wasn't just a project to her, it was a statement, a chance to create something meaningful for Charleston while proving her worth to herself and the city. The downtown bistro where Evelyn was set to meet Henry Barrington was chic yet understated, its exposed brick walls and sunlit windows creating an inviting atmosphere. Henry was already seated at a corner table when she arrived, his demeanor calm and self-assured. "Evelyn," he greeted, standing to pull out her chair. "Thank you for meeting me." "Thank you for the opportunity," she replied, setting her portfolio beside her. "I'm grateful to discuss the project further." The waiter appeared to take their orders, and within moments, they were deep in conversation. Evelyn unrolled her sketches, presenting detailed plans for the museum restoration. This design, she explained, pointing to a rendering of the central atrium, incorporates elements of Charleston's architectural heritage while introducing modern, sustainable materials. The goal is to create a space that feels timeless yet innovative. Henry studied the designs with keen interest, nodding occasionally as Evelyn elaborated on the budget, potential revenue streams, and community benefits. His questions were insightful, probing not to undermine her but to understand her vision fully. "Your plan is compelling," Henry said finally, closing the portfolio. "But I need to ask, are you prepared for resistance? This kind of project doesn't happen without opposition." Evelyn met his gaze, her voice steady. "I've faced resistance before, Mr. Barrington. Jonathan Pierce being a prime example." Henry's brow lifted, his expression briefly amused. "Touché." He leaned back in his chair, his tone turning serious. "I'll commit to funding a significant portion of this project, but you'll need to secure additional backing from the museum board and other stakeholders. Can you do that?" "I can," Evelyn said confidently. "And with your support, I'll have the leverage I need to bring the others on board." They shook hands, sealing the agreement, but as Evelyn left the bistro, a sense of unease lingered. She knew Jonathan's interference wouldn't end quietly. He had always been relentless when his ego was at stake, and this project was personal for him. As Evelyn stepped into the bright midday sun, her phone buzzed in her handbag. She retrieved it, glancing at the screen. "Margaret, darling, you need to see this. Jonathan just announced a competing proposal for the museum project. He's calling for a board vote next week. Be ready." Evelyn paused, her fingers tightening around the phone. So this was Jonathan's play, a direct challenge designed to undermine her momentum. Good, she thought. Let him try. Her resolve hardened as she headed back to her car. She wouldn't just meet Jonathan's efforts, she would surpass them, proving once and for all who truly belonged at the helm of Charleston's cultural renaissance. Evelyn Harper sat at her desk, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across her office. Her usually neat workspace was a battlefield of blueprints, financial statements, and emails. The message from Margaret still lingered in her mind, each word stoking a slow burn of frustration and determination. Jonathan just announced a competing proposal for the museum project. He's calling for a board vote next week. Evelyn had known Jonathan wouldn't stand idly by as her vision for the museum restoration gained traction. But this? A blatant attempt to undermine her progress by presenting his own rival proposal? It was audacious, even for him. Still, she refused to let anger distract her. If Jonathan wanted a fight, she would face him head-on, prepared, resolute, and unyielding. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at Margaret's house, a stately Victorian home draped in ivy. The scent of fresh coffee greeted her as she stepped inside, and Margaret, ever poised, greeted her with a warm smile. "Darling, you look ready for battle," Margaret said, leading her to the sitting room where an array of documents was spread across the coffee table. "I've been digging into Jonathan's announcement." "And?" Evelyn asked, lowering herself into the plush armchair opposite Margaret. Margaret handed her a sleek folder. "He's pitching a modernized vision for the museum, something sleek, minimalist, and designed to appeal to corporate sponsors. He's claiming his plan will be faster and cheaper than yours." Evelyn opened the folder, her eyes scanning the glossy renderings. The designs were indeed modern but devoid of character, completely disconnected from the museum's historical essence. She closed the folder, her jaw tightening. "He's playing to the board's fears," Evelyn said. "Fast results, low costs. It's a short-term fix that sacrifices everything this project is supposed to stand for." "Exactly," Margaret agreed. But he's leveraging his connections hard. He's already reached out to a few undecided board members. If he can plant seeds of doubt about your proposal, he could sway the vote. Evelyn finished, her voice calm but firm. Not if I can help it. Margaret nodded approvingly. Good. Now, here's what we're going to do. We need to counter his narrative before it takes hold. The community is on your side, Evelyn. Let's make sure the board knows it. By the afternoon, Evelyn was back at the museum, meeting with Reverend Bradley and Dr. Elena Hayes. She had called on them both to help bolster her defense against Jonathan's tactics. Elena, I need your expertise to highlight the historical significance of the museum, Evelyn said, unrolling a blueprint on the table. Jonathan's proposal completely disregards its architectural heritage. Elena adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, studying the blueprint. These details, your atrium design, the restoration of original molding, they honor the museum's soul. Jonathan's plan? It's sterile. It strips away everything that makes this building unique. Reverend Bradley, seated across the table, nodded in agreement. And the community knows it, he said. They've seen what you're trying to achieve, Evelyn. This project isn't just about preserving a building, it's about preserving a piece of Charleston's identity. Evelyn felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you both. Your voices carry weight, and I need them now more than ever. Consider us your allies, Reverend Bradley said firmly. This city needs people who fight for more than profit. The following evening, Evelyn sat in her living room, reviewing her strategy for the week ahead. Her daughter Grace joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. Still working? Grace asked, handing her mother a mug and curling up on the couch. There's a lot to prepare, Evelyn admitted, taking a sip. Jonathan's pushing hard against me. The board votes in less than a week. Grace frowned. Why does he care so much? You're not competing with him. You're just trying to make the museum better. Evelyn smiled at her daughter's innocence. Because, sweetheart, Jonathan doesn't like losing. He's used to being in control, and my success threatens that. Then you'll just have to win, Grace said matter-of-factly, her confidence in her mother unshakable. Evelyn reached out, squeezing her daughter's hand. I plan to. The morning of the board meeting dawned bright and clear. Evelyn arrived early, armed with a meticulously prepared presentation. The boardroom buzzed with quiet conversation as members filed in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. At the far end of the room, Jonathan was already seated, his trademark confidence radiating like a polished suit of armor. The chairman called the meeting to order, inviting Jonathan to present his proposal first. He strode to the podium, his movements fluid and assured. His presentation was slick, filled with dazzling graphics and corporate buzzwords. He painted Evelyn's proposal as impractical and overly ambitious, subtly suggesting that she lacked the experience to manage a project of this scale. When he finished, the room murmured with polite applause. Evelyn didn't flinch. Taking her place at the podium, Evelyn began her presentation with a simple statement. This project isn't just about restoring a building, it's about restoring Charleston's pride. She walked the board through her proposal, slide by slide, highlighting the historical integrity of her designs, the long-term sustainability of her budget, and the overwhelming community support she had garnered. She didn't shy away from addressing Jonathan's claims directly, countering each with evidence and calm conviction. I understand the temptation to prioritize speed and cost, Evelyn said, her voice steady. But the Charleston Museum deserves more than a quick fix. It deserves a restoration that honors its history and ensures its relevance for future generations. When she finished, the room was silent, the board members exchanging thoughtful glances. Finally, the chairman spoke. Thank you, Ms. Harper. Both proposals offer unique strengths. The board will deliberate and announce our decision shortly. As the meeting adjourned, Evelyn stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, her heart pounding. Margaret joined her on the steps, her expression unreadable. Well? Evelyn asked. Margaret's lips curved into a small smile. You were brilliant. Evelyn exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. The battle wasn't over, but she had fought with everything she had. Now, all she could do was wait. Back at home that evening, Evelyn sat by the fire, Grace by her side. They didn't speak, but the silence was comfortable, filled with a shared understanding. No matter what happened, Evelyn knew one thing for certain: she had stayed true to herself, and that was a victory in its own right. The sun was just beginning to rise over Charleston when Evelyn Harper's phone buzzed insistently on her nightstand. Half asleep, she reached for it, blinking against the harsh glow of the screen. It was a text from Margaret. Board vote results are in. Call me ASAP. Her stomach clenched, nerves jangling like wind chimes in a storm. Swinging her legs out of bed, she dialed Margaret's number with trembling hands. Good morning, darling, Margaret answered, her voice calm but tinged with anticipation. Tell me, Evelyn said, bracing herself for the verdict. Margaret hesitated for a moment, savoring the suspense. It's yours, Evelyn. The board voted in your favor. Relief and exhilaration crashed over her in waves. Oh my God! She whispered, her voice catching. We did it. No, you did it, Margaret said firmly. You fought with grace, integrity, and vision. Charleston deserves this, and so do you. Later that morning, Evelyn found herself at the Charleston Museum, standing in the grand, sunlit atrium. The space was quiet, the faint hum of the city outside serving as the only backdrop. Her gaze wandered over the building's weathered details, imagining how they would look once restored to their former glory. This was the moment she had been working toward, a chance to breathe life back into this historic gem. Her thoughts were interrupted by the click of approaching heels. She turned to see Reverend Bradley and Dr. Elena Hayes walking toward her, their expressions warm and celebratory. We heard the news, Reverend Bradley said, extending a hand. Congratulations, Evelyn. This is a victory for the entire community. Evelyn shook his hand, a genuine smile spreading across her face. Thank you both. Your support made all the difference. Dr. Hayes adjusted her glasses, her eyes scanning the atrium. It's hard to believe this space will soon be filled with light and life again. Your vision is exactly what Charleston needs. It's going to take a lot of work, Evelyn admitted. But I'm ready for it. We're here to help however we can, Reverend Bradley assured her. This project belongs to all of us. By mid-afternoon, Evelyn was back in her office, already deep in preparation for the next phase. Her desk was cluttered with project schedules, contractor bids, and design mock-ups. She had barely taken a sip of her lukewarm coffee when her assistant knocked softly on the door. Miss Harper, the young woman began, her voice hesitant. Jonathan Pierce is here to see you. Evelyn's grip on her pen tightened, but she maintained her composure. Show him in. Jonathan entered, his polished demeanor as impeccable as ever, but there was a sharpness in his eyes, a faint trace of defeat masked by his usual confidence. Evelyn, he said smoothly, extending a hand. Congratulations on the board's decision. Thank you, she replied, shaking his hand briefly before gesturing for him to sit. What brings you here, Jonathan? He settled into the chair across from her, his expression carefully neutral. I wanted to discuss the future. Despite our differences, I believe we share a common goal: to see this museum thrive. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Do we? Because your actions so far suggest otherwise. Jonathan's smile faltered, but only slightly. I admit I've been aggressive. But I'd like to put that behind us. I have resources and connections that could benefit this project. If we pool our efforts. Evelyn cut him off with a calm but firm tone. I appreciate the offer, Jonathan, but I've seen how you operate. This project needs collaboration, not control. I won't compromise the museum's integrity to accommodate your ambitions. For a moment, his mask slipped, revealing a flash of irritation. But he recovered quickly, standing and buttoning his suit jacket. Fair enough. But don't forget, Evelyn, this city has a long memory. Evelyn stood as well, meeting his gaze evenly. And so do I. Jonathan offered a tight smile before turning and leaving her office. Evelyn sank back into her chair, her heart pounding. She had faced him down, but she knew this wouldn't be the last time Jonathan tried to interfere. That evening, Evelyn joined Grace for dinner at their townhouse. The cozy glow of the kitchen light softened the day's tension as Grace set 2 plates on the table. So, Grace began, looking up with a sly grin. You beat Dad. Evelyn chuckled softly. It's not about beating anyone, Grace. It's about doing what's right for Charleston. Sure, Grace said, smirking. But it still feels good, right? Evelyn couldn't help but smile. A little, yeah? As they ate, Grace's expression turned more serious. Do you think he'll try to mess things up again? Probably, Evelyn admitted. But I'm not afraid of him. We've got too much momentum now. This isn't just my project anymore. It belongs to the community. That's something even Jonathan can't undo. Grace nodded, her confidence in her mother unwavering. Then he doesn't stand a chance. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Contractors were hired, schedules finalized, and permits secured. Evelyn worked tirelessly, her focus on every detail of the restoration. But despite the progress, a sense of unease lingered. She knew Jonathan wasn't finished with his games. Her suspicions were confirmed when Margaret called her late one night. Evelyn, Margaret said, her voice tight with urgency. Jonathan's reached out to one of your major donors. He's trying to convince them to withdraw their support. Evelyn's grip on her phone tightened. Do we know who? The Winthrop Foundation, Margaret replied. They're one of your largest backers. If he sways them. He won't, Evelyn said firmly, though her stomach churned. I'll reach out to them first thing in the morning. You're going to need more than just reassurance, Margaret warned. You'll need to prove that Jonathan's tactics are baseless. Don't worry, Evelyn said. I've got this. The following morning, Evelyn arrived at the offices of the Winthrop Foundation armed with a detailed presentation. She met with the Foundation's board, addressing every concern and reaffirming their commitment to the museum's future. By the end of the meeting, their support was solidified. But as Evelyn left the building, her phone buzzed with a new message from Margaret. Jonathan's planning another move. Call me. Evelyn sighed, her resolve hardening. Jonathan might be relentless, but so was she. This project was her legacy, and she would fight for it with everything she had. Evelyn stood at the museum's site, watching as the construction crew maneuvered scaffolding into place. The faint sounds of hammering echoed through the open atrium, mingling with the hum of heavy machinery. It was a vision in motion, the museum's transformation finally taking shape after months of preparation. But Evelyn couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over her. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. It was Margaret. Darling, Margaret began, her tone tense. Jonathan's playing dirty again. He's scheduled a press conference this afternoon to announce a so-called competing proposal for the museum. He's claiming he has new funding and a more efficient plan. Evelyn inhaled sharply, gripping the phone tighter. Of course he is. Any idea what angle he's taking? Efficiency and speed, naturally, Margaret said with a scoff. He's spinning it as a way to modernize the museum without the expense and time your proposal requires. He's already reached out to the media to paint you as impractical. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Let him spin. The truth is on our side. Be careful, Evelyn, Margaret warned. Jonathan thrives on spectacle. He'll stop at nothing to undermine you. By mid-afternoon, the city was abuzz with news of Jonathan's press conference. Evelyn watched it unfold on her laptop from the comfort of her office, her coffee untouched beside her. Jonathan stood on the museum steps, flanked by his team of developers. He exuded confidence, gesturing smoothly as he spoke into the cluster of microphones. The Charleston Museum deserves a restoration plan that is both innovative and efficient, he proclaimed. My team has developed a proposal that will preserve the museum's historical essence while delivering results faster and at a lower cost. This is about doing what's best for Charleston, not indulging in overblown dreams. Evelyn's stomach churned as Jonathan's words twisted her vision into something impractical and self-serving. The reporters ate it up, their pens scratching furiously as they nodded along. He was selling a fantasy, and Evelyn knew it. Margaret called as soon as the conference ended. He's gained traction, she said grimly. The media's already running with his sound bites. You need to respond. Evelyn closed her laptop, her expression hardening. Then we'll respond. That evening, Evelyn and Margaret gathered their team at a small downtown office to strategize. The room was a hive of activity, papers spread across the table and laptops glowing as they worked. We need to focus on facts, Evelyn said, addressing the group. Jonathan's proposal might sound appealing, but it's a house of cards. We'll emphasize transparency and sustainability, things he can't deliver. Margaret nodded, her expression fierce. And we'll highlight the community's role in this project. Your plan isn't just about restoring a building, it's about creating a cultural hub for Charleston. Evelyn's assistant chimed in, holding up a tablet. The video we shot with Reverend Bradley and Dr. Hayes has been getting great feedback. If we push it to local news outlets and social media, we can shift the narrative. Do it, Evelyn said firmly. And let's schedule a media briefing at the museum's site. I want them to see the progress we've made and hear directly from the people this project will impact. 2 days later, Evelyn stood in front of the museum's grand entrance, the sun shining brightly overhead. Reporters milled about, their cameras trained on the scaffolding and workers behind her. Margaret had orchestrated the event to perfection, ensuring key community leaders were present to lend their voices to Evelyn's cause. Evelyn stepped to the podium, her heart steady as she began to speak. Thank you all for being here today. The Charleston Museum is more than just a building, it's a cornerstone of our community's history and culture. This restoration isn't just about preserving the past, it's about building a future that reflects who we are. She gestured to the scaffolding behind her. As you can see, we're making progress. Every decision we've made has been guided by transparency, accountability, and a commitment to excellence. This project belongs to Charleston, and it's our responsibility to get it right. Reverend Bradley and Dr. Hayes followed with impassioned speeches, emphasizing the project's cultural and historical significance. The reporters listened intently, their skepticism softening as the event unfolded. When the briefing ended, Evelyn mingled with attendees, answering questions and sharing her vision. The atmosphere was hopeful, a stark contrast to the doubt Jonathan had tried to sow. As she walked back to her car, Margaret caught up with her. You handled that beautifully, Margaret said, her eyes gleaming with pride. Jonathan doesn't stand a chance. Evelyn smiled, but her thoughts were already racing. "He's not done, Margaret. He'll keep pushing until he's out of moves." Margaret's expression turned serious. "Then we'll make sure he runs out of moves. You've got the community behind you now, Evelyn. That's a force he can't manipulate." The next morning, Evelyn received a call from Charles. "Evelyn," Charles began, his voice tight with urgency. "Jonathan's trying to sway the board. He's claiming your plan is behind schedule and over budget." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "That's a lie, and he knows it." "Of course it is," Charles said. "But lies have a way of sticking if they aren't countered. You need to present your case to the board immediately, show them the truth." Evelyn's determination hardened. "Schedule a meeting. I'll be ready." The board meeting was tense, the air heavy with unspoken conflict. Evelyn stood at the head of the table, her presentation meticulously prepared. She walked the board through every detail of the project, timelines, budgets, and progress reports, leaving no room for doubt. "This isn't just a project to me," she said, her voice steady. "It's a commitment to Charleston's history, culture, and future. I've faced challenges, but I've met each one head-on, and I'll continue to do so." When she finished, the board members exchanged glances, their expressions thoughtful. One by one, they voiced their support, reaffirming their faith in her leadership. Jonathan left the room without a word, his defeat evident in his stiff posture. Evelyn allowed herself a small smile as she gathered her materials. The storm was far from over, but she had weathered its latest onslaught. And as she stepped out into the Charleston sunshine, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Jonathan could try to derail her, but this project was bigger than him, and bigger than her. It belonged to Charleston, and she wouldn't let anything stand in its way. The weeks following the board meeting were a blur of progress and preparation. Evelyn threw herself into the restoration with renewed determination, overseeing every detail with meticulous care. The Charleston Museum was beginning to reflect the vision she had fought so hard to defend, but she knew the battle wasn't over. Jonathan's latest moves had rattled her team, and his influence still lingered like a dark cloud over the project. Evelyn's mornings were filled with site visits, where she reviewed the progress on the museum's structural restoration. The intricate moldings in the atrium were being carefully restored by skilled artisans, while the once crumbling facade had been reinforced to stand strong for generations to come. The museum was transforming into the cultural beacon she had envisioned, but there was no time to bask in the accomplishments. Jonathan's shadow loomed too large. One crisp morning, Evelyn sat in her office, poring over a proposal from a local artist collective to feature their work in the museum's new community gallery. Her assistant entered with a hesitant knock. "Miss Harper," she said, holding out a tablet. "You need to see this." Evelyn took the device, her stomach sinking as she read the headline. "Jonathan Pierce doubles down on criticism of museum restoration." The article outlined Jonathan's latest ploy, a scathing critique of her leadership, published in a prominent local paper. He accused her of mismanagement, claiming delays and budget overruns were proof of her inability to see the project through. Evelyn's grip on the tablet tightened. "He's relentless," she muttered. "He's desperate," her assistant replied. "But this is gaining traction. What's the plan?" Evelyn exhaled slowly, her mind racing. "We'll respond with facts, again. Schedule an update for the press at the museum's site. Let them see the progress for themselves." 2 days later, Evelyn stood in the museum's newly restored atrium, addressing a roomful of reporters. The air was thick with anticipation as she began her statement. "There have been rumors and accusations regarding the museum restoration project," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "Let me set the record straight. We are on schedule, on budget, and committed to delivering a space that honors Charleston's rich history while embracing its future. She gestured toward the scaffolding in the East Wing. This isn't just talk. Look around you. The progress is real, and it's a testament to the dedication of every person involved in this project. After Evelyn finished her presentation, she invited reporters to tour the site, guided by the artisans and historians working on the restoration. The atmosphere shifted as journalists saw firsthand the care and precision being poured into every detail. The skepticism that had shadowed the project began to wane, replaced by admiration and genuine interest. Margaret approached Evelyn as the event wound down, her smile tinged with pride. "You've turned the tide, my dear. The truth always has a way of rising to the surface." That evening, Evelyn returned home, exhausted but buoyed by the day's success. She settled into her favorite armchair, a glass of wine in hand, as Grace wandered into the room. "Big day, huh?" Grace said, plopping onto the couch. Evelyn smiled tiredly. "Big, but worth it. How was school?" Grace shrugged. "Fine. But everyone's talking about the museum. A bunch of my friends' parents saw the news and said they can't wait to visit once it's done." Evelyn's heart swelled. "That's the goal. To create something everyone feels connected to. You're doing that," Grace said earnestly. "I'm proud of you, Mom." Evelyn reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Grace's face. "That means more than you know, sweetheart." The next morning, Evelyn received a call from Charles. "Evelyn," he said, his tone urgent. "I've just heard from one of my contacts. Jonathan's pulling his biggest stunt yet. He's secured a meeting with the mayor and a few city council members. He's pitching a last-minute alternative to your plan." Evelyn's jaw clenched. "Of course he is. What's his angle?" "Speed and cost," Charles replied. "He's promising them expedited results and lower expenses. You need to act fast, or he could sway their support." Evelyn's mind raced. "Then I'll meet with them, too." "Schedule it." Later that week, Evelyn found herself in the city council chambers, facing the mayor and a small group of council members. Jonathan sat across the room, his expression calm but smug. He had already made his pitch, and Evelyn knew the stakes were higher than ever. She stepped forward with her binder in hand, her voice steady but passionate. "Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I understand you've heard an alternative proposal, but I want to ensure the council has a full picture of what's at stake." Evelyn presented her case with precision, outlining the project's progress, the community partnerships it had fostered, and the long-term cultural and economic benefits. She didn't shy away from addressing Jonathan's claims, countering each one with facts and data. "This isn't just about cost or speed," she concluded. "It's about creating something that will stand the test of time, something Charleston can be proud of for generations. Cutting corners might save money in the short term, but it won't serve the city's legacy." The room was silent for a moment before the mayor spoke. "Ms. Harper, your dedication to this project is clear, and your vision is compelling. We'll take everything you've shared into consideration." As Evelyn left the chamber, she caught Jonathan's gaze. His expression had soured, the confidence in his eyes replaced with something darker, frustration, perhaps even fear. She felt a flicker of satisfaction but didn't let it linger. The fight wasn't over yet. That evening, Evelyn returned to the museum site, standing in the quiet atrium as the last rays of sunlight streamed through the skylight. The air was heavy with dust and potential, and she allowed herself a moment of reflection. Jonathan was relentless, but so was she. This project wasn't just a battle against his manipulations. It was a fight for the soul of Charleston, for its history, and for its future. Evelyn knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was ready to face them. She wouldn't let Jonathan or anyone else diminish what she was building. This museum was more than a restoration, it was a testament to resilience, vision, and the power of community. And Evelyn Harper wasn't backing down. The Charleston skyline shimmered in the early morning light, a sign of hope to Evelyn as she stepped out of her car and onto the gravel lot outside the museum. The restoration was well underway, but the weight of Jonathan's relentless opposition bore down on her. She had barely slept the past few nights, her mind filled with strategy, counterarguments, and contingency plans. Inside, the museum was alive with activity. Workers scaled scaffolding, artisans restored intricate woodwork, and historians meticulously planned the layout of exhibits. Evelyn found solace in the bustle, the physical manifestation of her vision taking shape. Yet, she couldn't ignore the whispers in the background, the murmurs about Jonathan's latest press conference, and his attempts to derail her progress. By mid-morning, Evelyn was in a meeting with her core team, including Margaret, Reverend Bradley, and Charles. The tension in the room was palpable. Jonathan's press conference painted a rosy picture of his alternative plan, Charles said, his frustration evident. He's spinning it as faster, cheaper, and more modern. He even hinted at having secured the mayor's tentative support. Evelyn leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. We need to shift the narrative. His plan might sound appealing on the surface, but it's hollow. We have the substance, and it's time to make that undeniable. Margaret nodded, her expression resolute. We need to go beyond facts and figures. We need to remind people why this museum matters. The community needs to feel connected to your vision. Reverend Bradley leaned back in his chair, his voice steady. Then let's give the community a voice. A town hall meeting could do just that. Let people share their stories, their connection to the museum. Show them that this project isn't just about restoration, it's about identity. Evelyn's eyes lit up. A town hall is perfect. We'll highlight the community's involvement and emphasize the cultural importance of the museum. And we'll invite the media. Let Jonathan see what real support looks like. The following week, the town hall took place in the museum's newly restored atrium. Evelyn stood backstage, her heart pounding as she listened to the hum of the gathered crowd. The turnout was far larger than she had anticipated. Families, artists, historians, and community leaders packed the room, their faces alight with anticipation. Margaret approached, her smile warm and reassuring. This is your moment, Evelyn. Show them why you fought so hard for this. Evelyn stepped onto the stage to a wave of applause. Taking a steadying breath, she began. Good evening, she said, her voice clear but emotional. Thank you for being here tonight. The Charleston Museum has always been more than a building. It's a vessel for our stories, our heritage, and our future. This restoration isn't just about preserving history, it's about creating a space where every member of our community feels represented and inspired. Her words resonated, and she could see nods of agreement throughout the crowd. She shared her vision for the museum, the challenges she had faced, and the progress made. But the most powerful moment came when she invited members of the community to speak. An elderly woman stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. This museum was where my grandchildren learned about their roots. It's where I felt a connection to my ancestors. Evelyn's plan isn't just about restoring a building, it's about restoring a piece of who we are. A young artist followed, sharing how the new community gallery would provide opportunities for local creators to showcase their work. Reverend Bradley spoke last, his voice carrying a gravitas that commanded attention. This museum is a testament to resilience, he said. Evelyn Harper hasn't just fought for a building, she's fought for all of us. And that's why this project will succeed. As the town hall concluded, Evelyn mingled with attendees, answering questions and listening to their stories. The energy in the room was electric, a stark contrast to the doubt and skepticism Jonathan had tried to sow. Later that evening, Evelyn and Margaret sat in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe, reflecting on the event. "You did it, Evelyn," Margaret said, raising her teacup in a toast. "The community is behind you." Evelyn smiled, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. "It's not just me. It's all of us." The next day, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a call from Charles. "Evelyn," he said, his tone triumphant. "Jonathan's losing ground. The media is picking up on the town hall, and his claims are being questioned. Even the mayor's office is backing away from supporting him outright." Relief flooded through her. "That's the best news I've heard all week." "There's more," Charles added. "The board is convening an emergency meeting to discuss the direction of the project. With the momentum we've gained, I think they're leaning in your favor." The board meeting was scheduled for the following week, and Evelyn prepared meticulously. She knew this was her opportunity to solidify her position and dispel any lingering doubts. When the day arrived, she stood before the board with confidence, presenting a comprehensive update on the project's progress and reaffirming her commitment to transparency and excellence. Jonathan, as expected, tried to undermine her. But his arguments felt hollow against the backdrop of Evelyn's dedication and the community's unwavering support. When the vote was called, the decision was unanimous. Evelyn would remain at the helm of the restoration. As she stepped out of the boardroom, Margaret and Charles waiting with beaming smiles, Evelyn felt a wave of emotion. This victory wasn't just hers, it was the community's, a testament to resilience, collaboration, and the power of standing firm against adversity. But Evelyn knew this was only the beginning. The real work lay ahead, and she was ready for it. The days following Evelyn's victory in the boardroom were a blur of progress. The Charleston Museum restoration project had gained unstoppable momentum. Contractors worked tirelessly, the community's involvement deepened, and donations flowed steadily. Yet, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that Jonathan Pierce wasn't finished with his schemes. She knew him too well. Defeat wouldn't sit lightly with him. It was late one evening when Evelyn's phone buzzed on her desk. The message was from Charles. "Urgent, call me ASAP. Jonathan's planning a last-ditch effort." Evelyn immediately dialed his number, her stomach tightening as she waited for him to pick up. "Charles," she said the moment he answered. "What's going on?" "Jonathan's reached out to a powerful developer from out of state," Charles explained. "He's trying to bypass the board entirely by proposing a privatized partnership with the city council. If he pulls it off, it could derail the restoration and turn the museum into a commercial venture." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. "He's going to strip the museum of its cultural identity and turn it into a profit machine." "Exactly," Charles said. "He's banking on the idea that the council will see his plan as financially advantageous." Evelyn took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Then we'll show them the truth. I need to meet with the council before he has the chance to sway them. Can you set it up?" "I'll make the calls," Charles said. "But be prepared, Jonathan's not playing by the rules anymore." 2 days later, Evelyn found herself standing outside City Hall, her binder of meticulously prepared documents clutched in her hands. The morning was overcast, the gray sky mirroring her apprehension. Inside, the council chambers were bustling with activity as council members shuffled papers and exchanged quiet words. Evelyn spotted Jonathan seated near the front of the room, his trademark smug expression firmly in place. He glanced at her briefly, offering a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach his eyes. The chairman called the meeting to order, and Jonathan was the first to present. He unveiled glossy visuals and spoke with rehearsed confidence, emphasizing the potential revenue his proposal could generate. He framed his plan as innovative and forward-thinking, subtly dismissing Evelyn's efforts as outdated and unsustainable. When he finished, polite applause rippled through the room, but Evelyn caught the flicker of doubt in a few council members' eyes. This was her opening. The chairman turned to her. "Ms. Harper, you may present your rebuttal." Evelyn rose, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she approached the podium. She took a deep breath and began, her voice steady but passionate. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak," she began. "What we're discussing today isn't just a restoration project. It's the heart of Charleston's cultural identity." She flipped through her slides, highlighting the meticulous planning, community involvement, and long-term benefits of her proposal. She didn't shy away from Jonathan's claims, addressing each with hard data and testimonials from local leaders and historians. "Mr. Pierce's plan may promise quick profits," she said, her voice firm. "But at what cost? His approach prioritizes commercial gain over cultural preservation, stripping the museum of its integrity. My proposal ensures that this institution remains a place of education, inspiration, and community connection." As she concluded, she turned to the council members, her gaze steady. "This isn't just about a building. It's about who we are as a city. The choice we make today will define our legacy for generations to come." The room was silent for a moment before a council member spoke. "Ms. Harper, your passion is evident, and your proposal is compelling. I'd like to hear from the community leaders who've endorsed your plan." Evelyn smiled, prepared for this. She gestured toward Reverend Bradley and Dr. Hayes, who were seated near the back. They rose and spoke eloquently about the significance of the museum, and Evelyn's unwavering commitment to preserving its cultural essence. "Evelyn's vision is more than a plan," Reverend Bradley said. "It's a promise to the people of Charleston that their stories, their history, and their pride will be honored." When the council adjourned to deliberate, Evelyn stepped outside for fresh air. Margaret joined her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You were brilliant in there," Margaret said. "Jonathan doesn't stand a chance." Evelyn nodded, but she couldn't ignore the nervous energy coursing through her. The stakes were too high, and Jonathan's cunning too unpredictable. After what felt like an eternity, the council reconvened. Evelyn and Jonathan returned to their seats, tension thick in the air. The chairman addressed the room. "After careful consideration, the council has decided to uphold the board's original decision. Ms. Harper's proposal will proceed as planned." Evelyn exhaled, relief washing over her. Jonathan's composure cracked for the briefest moment, his jaw tightening as he forced a neutral expression. As the room emptied, Jonathan approached Evelyn, his smile sharp and insincere. "Congratulations, Evelyn," he said, his tone clipped. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts." Evelyn met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't about winning or losing, Jonathan. It's about doing what's right. And that's something you'll never understand." She turned and walked away, Margaret and Charles flanking her as they stepped into the sunlight. For the first time, Evelyn felt the weight of Jonathan's shadow begin to lift. The path ahead was still challenging, but her resolve had never been stronger. That evening, Evelyn sat by the fire in her townhouse, a glass of wine in hand. Grace joined her, curling up on the sofa with a sketch pad. "You did it, Mom," Grace said, her voice filled with pride. Evelyn smiled, the warmth of her daughter's words chasing away the last remnants of doubt. "We did it," she said softly. "And the best is yet to come." As the fire crackled and the city settled into the quiet of the night, Evelyn allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The restoration was no longer a dream, it was a reality, and it belonged to everyone who had fought for it. The museum, much like Evelyn herself, was a testament to resilience, determination, and the power of community. The morning of the official groundbreaking ceremony for the Charleston Museum restoration project dawned crisp and clear, a fitting prelude to a day that marked a new chapter in the city's cultural history. Evelyn Harper stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting the lapel of her tailored navy blazer. Her reflection stared back, calm and composed, but inside she felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was a symbol of everything she had fought for. As Evelyn arrived at the site, the energy was electric. The front lawn of the museum was abuzz with activity. Rows of folding chairs were neatly arranged in front of a temporary stage, where a banner hung boldly, "Restoring the Heart of Charleston." Community members, local leaders, and media crews mingled, their chatter filling the crisp air. Margaret approached her, clipboard in hand and a gleam in her eye. "Darling, the turnout is better than we hoped. You've got the mayor, half the city council, and Reverend Bradley ready to speak. Oh, and the artist who designed that stunning mural is here too." Evelyn smiled, her nerves settling. "Thank you, Margaret. None of this would have been possible without your support." Margaret gave her a knowing look. "Don't downplay your role. You're the reason we're standing here today." The ceremony began with the mayor stepping onto the stage, his voice amplified by the sound system. He spoke about the museum's historical significance and praised Evelyn for her tireless dedication. "This project," the mayor said, gesturing toward the building behind him, "represents more than just bricks and mortar. It's a restoration of our city's identity, and it's thanks to Evelyn Harper's vision that we're embarking on this journey." The crowd erupted in applause as Evelyn stepped onto the stage. Her gaze swept over the sea of faces, spotting Grace in the front row, beaming with pride. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn began her speech. "Good morning, everyone," she started, her voice steady despite the emotions swelling within her. "Today is more than a groundbreaking ceremony, it's a testament to what we can achieve when we come together as a community." She spoke about the challenges they had faced, from financial obstacles to political interference, and how they had overcome them through unity and perseverance. "This museum is not just a building," she said, her voice rising with conviction. "It's a place where our stories are preserved, where our children can learn about the richness of our history, and where future generations can be inspired." As she finished, the applause was thunderous. Evelyn stepped back, allowing Reverend Bradley to take the stage. He spoke passionately about the museum's role in bridging the city's past and future, his words resonating deeply with the crowd. After the speeches, Evelyn joined the mayor and other dignitaries for the ceremonial groundbreaking. Each took hold of a shiny silver shovel, their hands clasping the wooden handles as photographers clicked away. When the first scoops of earth were turned, the crowd erupted in cheers, the sound echoing across the museum's grand facade. As the ceremony concluded, attendees mingled on the lawn. Evelyn made her way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging kind words. The atmosphere was celebratory, but she knew the real work was just beginning. "Ms. Harper," a voice called out. She turned to see a young woman holding a notebook and a microphone. "I'm with the Charleston Times. Could I get a quick word?" "Of course," Evelyn said, offering a polite smile. The reporter's questions were direct yet thoughtful. "What inspired you to take on this project, especially given the challenges you've faced?" Evelyn thought for a moment before answering. "This project isn't just about restoring a building, it's about restoring pride, connection, and belonging to this city. Charleston's history deserves to be celebrated, and I'm honored to play a part in that." Later that afternoon, Evelyn retreated to her townhouse, her mind still buzzing from the day's events. She curled up on the couch with a cup of tea, reflecting on the journey so far. The support from the community had been overwhelming, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that Jonathan Pierce might still have tricks up his sleeve. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a message from Charles. Heard whispers about Jonathan meeting with a new investor. Could be nothing, but I'll dig into it. Evelyn frowned, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't let Jonathan derail her progress. Not now, not ever. The next morning, Evelyn met with the construction team at the museum's site. Hard hats in hand, they walked through the building, discussing the timeline and logistics for the next phase. The skeletal framework of scaffolding and the hum of machinery filled the space, a tangible reminder that her vision was coming to life. "Ms. Harper," one of the project managers said, pointing to a section of the blueprints, "we've encountered some unexpected structural issues here. It's going to require additional work and might push the timeline back." Evelyn studied the plans carefully, her mind already racing with solutions. "Let's address this proactively. I'll contact our engineering consultant and see if we can expedite a workaround. Keep me updated." As the day wore on, Evelyn's confidence grew. Every challenge was an opportunity to prove her resilience and commitment. The restoration wasn't just a professional project, it was a personal mission. That evening, as she reviewed her notes at her desk, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Grace. "Mom," the message read, "I'm so proud of you. The museum's going to be amazing." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. The path ahead was still long, but moments like this reminded her why she had started this journey. For the city, for the community, and for herself. As she looked out her window at the Charleston skyline, the soft glow of the museum's facade in the distance, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The Charleston Museum site bustled with activity as the restoration project reached a critical juncture. Construction crews worked tirelessly, scaffolding adorned the facade, and the sound of hammers and saws echoed through the air. Evelyn Harper stood in the middle of the chaos, her hard hat perched atop her head, clipboard in hand. The groundbreaking ceremony was behind her, but the most challenging phase of the project lay ahead. Evelyn's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she stepped aside to take the call. It was Charles Whitman, his tone brisk. "Evelyn, I've got news. Jonathan's been meeting with some of the city council members. He's claiming there's been a misuse of funds in your project." Evelyn tightened her grip on the phone. "That's ridiculous. Every penny is accounted for." "I know," Charles said, "but he's pushing hard to sway public opinion. He's even hinting at filing an official complaint. You need to get ahead of this." "Thanks, Charles," Evelyn said, her mind already racing. "I'll handle it." Hanging up, she took a deep breath. Jonathan's tactics were as relentless as ever, but she had prepared for this. She wouldn't let his smear campaign derail her progress. That evening, Evelyn gathered her team in her townhouse. The atmosphere was tense but focused as they reviewed the project's financial reports, legal documents, and communications. Margaret was the first to speak. "We need to address this head-on. Transparency is key," she said, tapping her manicured nails on the conference table. "Let's hold a press briefing and invite reporters to see the site. Show them the progress and the integrity of the work." "I agree," Charles added. "The more we can highlight the meticulous planning and community involvement, the harder it'll be for Jonathan's lies to stick." Evelyn nodded. "Let's make it happen. I'll prepare the presentation myself. Margaret, can you help coordinate with the media?" "Already on it," Margaret said with a reassuring smile. The days leading to the Charleston Museum's grand reopening were a blur of activity. The buzz around the project was palpable, with media outlets running features on the restoration, local artists sharing sneak peeks of their contributions on social media, and community leaders voicing their excitement. But Evelyn Harper knew better than to bask in the moment too soon. Jonathan Pierce was far too cunning to concede quietly, and she could sense his next move brewing. The first sign came through an email forwarded by Charles Whitman. It was a press release Jonathan had sent to several influential stakeholders. The subject line read, "A call for accountability in Charleston's restoration efforts." Evelyn scanned the document, her anger mounting as she read. Jonathan claimed that the museum's reopening had been rushed, that corners had been cut, and that the community deserved a more measured and responsible approach. Charles called just as she finished reading. "He's doubling down," he said grimly. "This is his last-ditch effort to sow doubt before the ribbon-cutting ceremony." Evelyn exhaled sharply, her mind racing. "We've got the truth on our side, Charles. Let's make sure everyone sees it." That evening, Evelyn convened her team for a strategy meeting. Margaret, Charles, and a handful of key supporters joined her around the conference table. Margaret leaned forward, her expression fierce. "Jonathan's playing a dangerous game. He's banking on fear and doubt, but we've got something far more powerful: results." Evelyn nodded. "The museum is ready, the exhibits are breathtaking, and the community is behind us. We need to shift the focus to what's been achieved, not the noise he's creating." Charles added, "A media tour would help. Invite reporters to see the progress firsthand. Once they walk through those halls and see the transformation, Jonathan's claims won't hold water." "Agreed," Evelyn said. "Let's schedule it for tomorrow morning. I'll personally guide them through." The next day, Evelyn stood at the museum's entrance, greeting a group of reporters, photographers, and local influencers. She wore a crisp navy blazer, her confidence shining as brightly as the building behind her. "Thank you for coming," she began. "This project has been a labor of love, and I'm thrilled to share it with you today." As Evelyn led the group through the museum, she narrated the journey from conception to completion. She pointed out restored architectural details, interactive exhibits that brought Charleston's history to life, and community spaces designed for education and collaboration. The reporters were visibly impressed, jotting notes and snapping photos. One journalist, a veteran of Charleston's cultural scene, pulled Evelyn aside as the tour concluded. "I've covered a lot of projects," she said, "but this one feels different. You've created something truly special here." "Thank you," Evelyn replied, her voice steady but warm. "It's always been about honoring the community and its stories." The media tour's success rippled across Charleston. Articles praising the restoration flooded social media, accompanied by photos of the museum's stunning interiors. The community's excitement swelled, drowning out Jonathan's attempts to undermine the project. But Evelyn knew the true test would come at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Jonathan's claims had created ripples, and there was still a chance he tried to stir the pot on the big day. On the morning of the ceremony, Evelyn arrived at the museum early. The air was crisp, and the city seemed to hum with anticipation. Workers bustled around, setting up seating, podiums, and banners for the event. Margaret joined her, holding a clipboard. "Everything's running smoothly," she said. "The mayor's scheduled to speak first, followed by Reverend Bradley and Dr. Hayes. Then you'll close it out before the ribbon cutting." Evelyn nodded, scanning the crowd as guests began to arrive. She spotted Grace and her closest friends in the front row, their presence a steadying anchor amid the day's chaos. But as the clock ticked closer to the ceremony, Evelyn noticed a commotion near the entrance. Jonathan Pierce had arrived, flanked by two of his developers. His presence was like a dark cloud, but Evelyn refused to let it rattle her. The ceremony began with the mayor's speech, his words filled with praise for Evelyn's vision and leadership. Reverend Bradley and Dr. Hayes followed, each emphasizing the project's importance to Charleston's identity. When it was Evelyn's turn to speak, she stepped up to the podium, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice clear and steady. "This museum is more than just a building. It's a testament to Charleston's spirit, a bridge between our past and our future." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "This project was never about one person or one vision. It was about all of us, our stories, our history, and our shared commitment to preserving what makes Charleston extraordinary." Evelyn spoke from the heart, weaving in stories from the community and emphasizing the collaboration that had made the restoration possible. Her words resonated deeply, and when she finished, the crowd erupted in applause. Jonathan approached her afterward, his expression strained but controlled. "Well played, Evelyn," he said, his voice tinged with grudging respect. "It seems you've won." "This was never a game, Jonathan," Evelyn replied, her tone calm but firm. "It was about doing what's right for Charleston." Jonathan said nothing more, his defeat evident. As he walked away, Evelyn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The project was complete, and Jonathan's interference had failed to derail it. That evening, as the museum opened its doors to the public, Evelyn watched with a sense of fulfillment unlike any she'd ever known. Families explored the exhibits, children marveled at the interactive displays, and community leaders mingled in the newly restored atrium. Grace joined her, slipping her arm through her mother's. "You did it, Mom," she said, her voice filled with pride. "This is amazing." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling. "We did it, Grace. Together." As the night wore on, Evelyn stood beneath the museum's grand skylight, watching the city she loved come alive within its walls. It was a moment of triumph, not just for the project but for herself, a testament to her resilience, her vision, and her unwavering determination to create something truly extraordinary. "You said?" The Charleston Museum now stood as a vibrant beacon of hope and resilience, its polished facade gleaming under the golden rays of the late afternoon sun. The transformation was complete, yet for Evelyn Harper, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, not the end. The grand reopening had been a triumph, silencing Jonathan Pierce's opposition and securing her place as one of Charleston's most visionary leaders. But with the project officially completed, a new question emerged: what comes next? The weeks following the ribbon-cutting ceremony were a whirlwind of activity. The museum drew crowds from all corners of Charleston and beyond. Families, historians, and tourists marveled at the interactive exhibits, community spaces, and restored architectural details that reflected the city's rich history. Evelyn spent her days walking the museum's halls, greeting visitors, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. She loved watching people connect with the exhibits, especially the children whose wide-eyed curiosity reminded her of why she had taken on this monumental task in the first place. One afternoon, as she watched a young girl tracing her fingers over the timeline of Charleston's history etched into the wall, Evelyn felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Reverend Bradley, his warm smile as comforting as ever. "You've done something incredible here, Evelyn," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "This museum is more than a building now. It's a living testament to what a community can achieve when someone dares to lead with vision and heart." Evelyn smiled, touched by his words. "It wasn't just me, Reverend. This was a collective effort. The community believed in this project, and that belief carried it through." He nodded thoughtfully. "Still, it takes someone with courage to lead the way. Don't downplay what you've accomplished." Despite the success, Evelyn couldn't escape the nagging feeling that there was more to be done. The museum was thriving, but Charleston still faced challenges, inequities, unacknowledged histories, and communities in need of uplift. She began to wonder how she could leverage the momentum from the museum's success to address these broader issues. The answer came unexpectedly during a meeting with Margaret Lancaster. They were seated in a cozy cafe downtown, sipping on their coffees as they reviewed the museum's latest attendance numbers. "You know," Margaret said, leaning back in her chair, "you've proven that you can bring people together for a cause. Why stop with the museum? There's so much more this city needs, and you're in a unique position to make a difference." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting I take on another massive project? Because I was hoping for at least a 6-month break." Margaret laughed. "Not exactly. But what if you started an initiative? Something that uses the museum as a hub for broader change, education programs, historical preservation efforts, community outreach. You've built a platform. Now use it." Evelyn sat back, the idea sparking something within her. "A cultural initiative," she mused. "One that brings the city's untold stories to light, while empowering the next generation to preserve and shape our history." Margaret nodded. "Exactly. Charleston needs that, Evelyn. And you're the person to make it happen." Within weeks, Evelyn was deep into planning. She envisioned an organization that would partner with schools, local artists, and historians to create programs that celebrated Charleston's diversity and addressed its lingering inequities. The initiative would fund scholarships for students pursuing careers in history and the arts, provide grants for small businesses in underserved communities, and organize events that highlighted the contributions of marginalized groups to Charleston's cultural fabric. To launch the initiative, Evelyn decided to host a gala at the museum. It felt fitting to use the very space she had fought so hard to restore as the springboard for her next endeavor. The night of the gala arrived with the same electric anticipation that had filled the air at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The museum was transformed into a dazzling venue, with fairy lights draped across the atrium and a jazz quartet playing softly in the background. Evelyn stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. Grace, now her unofficial event coordinator, darted around ensuring every detail was perfect. "You look amazing, Mom," Grace said, pausing to adjust the strap of Evelyn's sleek navy gown. "Everyone's going to love this." Evelyn smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Grace." "Thank you." The evening was a resounding success. Guests mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, exploring the museum's exhibits and marveling at the vision Evelyn had brought to life. When it was time for her to speak, she took the stage with a quiet confidence that had grown stronger through every challenge she had faced. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and warm. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This museum has always been about more than preserving the past. It's about creating a future where every story is valued and every voice is heard. And tonight we take the first step toward that future together." She unveiled her plans for the cultural initiative, sharing her vision for how it would empower the community and ensure that Charleston's rich tapestry of history and culture continued to flourish. The room erupted in applause, and as Evelyn looked out at the sea of faces, friends, colleagues, community members, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the museum was quiet again, Evelyn stood in the atrium, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Grace joined her, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "To you, Mom," Grace said, holding up her glass. "And to everything you've accomplished." Evelyn clinked her glass against her daughter's, a soft smile on her lips. "To us, Grace. And to the journey ahead." As she sipped her champagne, Evelyn allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. She had fought battles, faced doubts, and overcome obstacles to get here. But she knew the work was far from over. The museum's restoration had been a victory, but it was just the beginning of a larger legacy she hoped to build. With the city's lights twinkling through the museum's grand skylight, Evelyn Harper felt ready to take on whatever came next. Evelyn Harper had thought she understood fulfillment. The grand reopening of the Charleston Museum, her victory over Jonathan Pierce, and the warm embrace of her community had all been monumental milestones. But standing at the helm of her newly launched cultural initiative, she realized that fulfillment wasn't a finish line, it was an ever-evolving journey. The morning after the gala, Evelyn returned to the museum. Though the atrium was quiet, the energy of the previous night lingered in the air. She walked through the halls, now brimming with life, as the team prepared for the first wave of programs under the initiative. The sound of laughter echoed from the community space where children participated in a storytelling workshop led by a local historian. This was the dream she hadn't even known she was building. And yet, as the initiative began to take shape, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest work still lay ahead. The first major undertaking of the initiative was the creation of an oral history project. Partnering with local schools and universities, Evelyn's team sought to record the stories of Charleston's oldest residents, particularly those from marginalized communities whose voices had long been silenced. To kick off the project, Evelyn visited the home of Mary Louisa Jenkins, a 96-year-old woman whose family had lived in Charleston for generations. Mary's home was a treasure trove of history, filled with photographs, handwritten letters, and heirlooms that told the story of a life deeply rooted in the city's past. Evelyn sat across from Mary in her cozy living room, the recorder running between them. "Tell me about your childhood, Mary," Evelyn said, her voice gentle but eager. "What was it like growing up in Charleston?" Mary's eyes sparkled as she began to speak. "Oh, honey, it was a different world back then. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And the city, it was our playground. The markets, the gardens, the church on Sundays, everything felt alive." As Mary recounted her stories, Evelyn felt a profound connection to the woman's words. These weren't just memories. They were pieces of a puzzle that painted a fuller picture of Charleston's history. Evelyn left Mary's house that afternoon with hours of recordings and a heart full of gratitude. But not every project unfolded so smoothly. One of the initiative's goals was to create educational workshops that addressed Charleston's complicated history, including its legacy of slavery and segregation. While many community members supported this effort, others resisted, claiming it dredged up painful memories better left in the past. Evelyn faced backlash at a public forum when a prominent businessman stood up and voiced his concerns. "Why focus on the negatives?" he asked, his tone sharp. "This city has so much beauty, so much to celebrate. Dwelling on the past only creates division." Evelyn took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Charleston is beautiful," she agreed. "But that beauty is made richer when we acknowledge every facet of its history. Ignoring the past doesn't erase its impact, it only silences the voices of those who lived it. If we want to move forward as a community, we have to do so with honesty and empathy." The room fell quiet. While not everyone agreed, many nodded in understanding. Evelyn knew the path forward wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to stay true to her mission. One afternoon, as Evelyn worked in her office, Margaret burst in with a newspaper in hand. "You're on the front page, darling," she announced, her excitement barely contained. Evelyn took the paper and read the headline. "Evelyn Harper's Initiative Redefines Charleston's Legacy." The accompanying article praised her efforts to bring the community together through education, art, and preservation. "This is wonderful," Evelyn said, smiling. But even as she celebrated the recognition, she couldn't ignore the pressure it brought. Success had its own weight, and every accomplishment raised the stakes for what came next. As the months went on, Evelyn's vision continued to expand. The initiative launched a scholarship fund for young artists and historians, hosted community art exhibitions, and partnered with local businesses to create internships for underprivileged youth. Each new program brought a fresh wave of challenges, but also a deeper sense of purpose. Grace, now preparing for her senior year of high school, had become one of Evelyn's most trusted confidants. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Grace turned to her mother with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever feel like it's too much?" she asked. "Like you've taken on more than you can handle?" Evelyn considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "There are days when I wonder if I'm making the right choices or if I'm trying to do too much. But then I see the impact this work has, the lives it touches, and it reminds me why I started in the first place." Grace nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You're amazing, Mom. I hope you know that." Evelyn reached over, squeezing her daughter's hand. "And you, Grace Harper, are my greatest accomplishment." By the end of the year, the cultural initiative had become a cornerstone of Charleston's community. Evelyn was invited to speak at conferences and events, her story serving as an inspiration to others. But through it all, she remained grounded in the work itself, listening to stories, fostering connections, and ensuring that the initiative stayed true to its mission. One day, as she walked through the museum's atrium, Evelyn paused to admire a new exhibit. It featured a collection of portraits from Charleston's past, paired with quotes from the Oral History Project. One quote, in particular, caught her eye. "Our stories are the roots of this city. Without them, we have no foundation." Evelyn smiled, the words resonating deeply. This was her legacy, not just the museum, not just the initiative, but the act of ensuring that every voice mattered. As she stepped outside into the crisp evening air, Evelyn Harper felt a sense of peace. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. And she knew, with unwavering certainty, that the best chapters of her story were still to come. Evelyn Harper stood at the top of the museum steps, gazing down at the vibrant crowd below. It had been a year since the museum reopened, and tonight marked the anniversary gala, a celebration of everything the restoration project and her cultural initiative had achieved. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting a warm glow over the scene, while laughter and the soft hum of a jazz band filled the air. This wasn't just a gala, it was a symbol of transformation, a testament to resilience, and a reflection of the community's soul. Inside the museum, guests roamed the exhibits, marveling at the fusion of history and modernity that Evelyn's vision had brought to life. The central atrium was the heart of it all, bustling with conversation and filled with art installations created by local artists. Evelyn's favorite was a mural that depicted Charleston's journey, its beauty, its struggles, and its enduring spirit. She moved through the crowd, stopping to chat with supporters, board members, and community leaders. Reverend Bradley was deep in conversation with Dr. Hayes, their shared passion for the museum evident in their animated gestures. Margaret floated gracefully between groups, her charm as effortless as ever. "Evelyn!" Margaret called, beckoning her over. "Darling, you have to hear what Reverend Bradley just said about you." Evelyn approached, a smile already forming. "I hope it's something kind," she teased. Reverend Bradley grinned. "Kind doesn't cover it. I was just telling Dr. Hayes that what you've done here is nothing short of miraculous. You've not only restored a building but brought this city together in a way we haven't seen in decades." Evelyn's heart swelled with gratitude. "Thank you, Reverend. But this wouldn't have been possible without all of you. This is as much your achievement as it is mine." As the evening unfolded, Evelyn found herself drawn to the quiet corners of the museum, where the energy of the crowd gave way to moments of reflection. She paused in front of an exhibit featuring oral histories, listening to a recording of Mary Louisa Jenkins' voice. "We didn't have much, but we had each other," Mary said, her voice warm and steady. "And that made all the difference." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. The stories collected in this project were more than memories. They were gifts, pieces of the past that would guide future generations. She opened her eyes to find Grace standing beside her, dressed in a sleek black gown that highlighted her newfound confidence. "You're thinking again," Grace said with a knowing smile. "Mom, it's a party. Try to enjoy it." Evelyn laughed softly. "You're right. But seeing all this, hearing Mary's voice, it reminds me why we started." Grace looped her arm through her mother's. "And it reminds me why you're amazing." Toward the end of the night, the jazz band paused, and the crowd gathered in the atrium for a series of speeches. Margaret took the podium first, her voice brimming with pride as she recounted the project's journey and Evelyn's tireless dedication. Finally, it was Evelyn's turn. She stepped forward, the room falling silent as all eyes turned to her. "Good evening," she began, her voice carrying the weight of emotion. "Tonight isn't just a celebration of what we've accomplished, it's a celebration of who we are as a community. This museum has always been more than a building. It's a home for our stories, our struggles, and our triumphs." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "When we began this journey, there were moments when I wasn't sure we would succeed. But every challenge, every doubt, was met with the unwavering support of all of you. Together, we've created something that will stand for generations." The crowd erupted in applause, and Evelyn stepped back, her heart full. As the band struck up again, the atmosphere shifted back to celebration. Guests raised their glasses, toasting the museum's success and the community's shared future. As the gala wound down, Evelyn found herself on the museum steps once more, this time joined by Henry Barrington. The two had become close allies over the past year, their professional partnership evolving into a genuine friendship. "You've outdone yourself," Henry said, offering her a glass of champagne. "This night, this museum, it's extraordinary." Evelyn smiled, accepting the glass. "It's hard to believe it's real sometimes. But seeing everyone here, feeling the energy, it makes all the hard work worth it." Henry nodded. "What's next for Evelyn Harper? Surely you're not stopping here." She chuckled. "Oh, I have plans. There's still so much to do. More stories to tell, more connections to build. The work doesn't end, it evolves." Henry raised his glass. "To evolution, then. And to you, Evelyn." They clinked glasses, the sound a quiet acknowledgement of all they had overcome. As the night faded, Evelyn lingered for a moment, gazing out at the city. The museum stood behind her, a glowing beacon of hope and resilience. She had rebuilt more than a building, she had rebuilt herself and her community. Evelyn Harper's legacy wasn't just in the museum or the initiative. It was in the lives she had touched, the stories she had preserved, and the future she had helped shape. And as she turned to step back inside, she knew with certainty that her journey was far from over.